Welcome to Bristol Bay Native Corporation's podcast series, Mug Up with BBNC. Mug Up is a term commonly used in the Bristol Bay region, specifically in the fishing community. It refers to getting together with friends and family for a casual gathering over a warm cup of coffee or tea. It's all about sharing stories, experiences, and connecting with one another. In this podcast, hosted by BBNC's communications team, you'll hear from BBNC employees, community leaders, and passionate individuals who are engaged in BBNC's mission of enriching our Native way of life. Thank you so much for joining us.
All right. Welcome back to our next episode of Mug Up with BBNC. This is Carmel from BBNC Communications, and I'm joined here today with Anise Oates, who's BBNC's communications specialist, and our guest, Carvel Zimin from South Naknek. So I'll go ahead and have you guys both introduce yourself. Anise, do you want to go first?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Anise. I'm the communications specialist here at BBNC. I'm so excited to be here. Just a little background about me. I'm raised in Anchorage, but my family is from Naknek. My grandma is Susan Mitchell.
Awesome. And thank you so much for joining us from South Naknek today, Carvel. Can you give a brief introduction of yourself?
Yeah, I'm Carvel Zimin, and I'm born and raised here in Bristol Bay, South Naknek. Specifically, I was born over in Naknek, and then, of course, we lived in South Naknek all my life. So, yeah, I born and raised here. I'm the Winter Watchman for Trident Seafoods. We grew up working at this cannery in South Naknek. It formerly was Alaska Packers Association. So I have a lot of history with Mug Up and stuff, and kind of cool to be able to talk about it.
Yeah, we're super excited to have you, and we'll get into that today. Carvel, can you tell us a little bit about what it was like growing up in South Naknek?
It seemed like there was a whole lot more people than there is today, but it was a lot of fun. My mom worked at the post office, and my dad worked in the canneries, and I had two other brothers and two other sisters, and it was a lot of fun growing up in South Naknek. There was more people here and a lot of different things to do. Back in the day, we didn't have iPads or internet or anything like that, so we created our own fun. We would go out and explore other places in the village or out and about, like some abandoned canneries at Diamond O and Diamond M, but there was operating canneries, and Alaska Packers Association had one, and Bumblebee Seafoods had one that was operating, and Kenai Packers had one. They had operated there too. And there was also the Peter Pan Cannery, and they were mostly a fish camp when I grew up, and I had friends up there. So we'd, go out and do different things, play all day long. Seemed like we left in the morning. Dad and Mom didn't have to worry about us. We were gone all day and come back for dinner most of the time.
That's awesome. Obviously, you had some spots that you'd go to. So would you mainly just, hang around the old abandoned canneries, or was there anywhere else in South Naknek that you would visit or like to hang out with your friends?
Well, there was a lot of kids here at the time, so we would almost gather up in groups and go down to the old abandoned cannery at Diamond Dam. It was a lot of fun because it was an abandoned cannery. Nobody was there. Some of the fun things was on one of the warehouses, they had a whole bunch of boxes that they used to put the canned salmon in.
Yeah.
But they were empty, already formed and already made. So, there was just a big stack of them. And one of the kids decided to get everybody together and create a whole bunch of boxes with pathways in between. And it was always fun to play hide and seek because we would tear all the boxes down, rebuild, and everybody would build their own section, and it was all together. And it seemed like it was a lot of fun just to go through the pathway that you created, and it was always dark. You couldn't see anything, so you couldn't tell where the wall was coming up, change direction or what. And it was a lot of fun just doing that kind of stuff, along with looking for old bottles. It was an abandoned cannery, so history-wise, I imagine there was a lot of old bottles that were like pop bottles or whatever, and so it was fun to collect those and try to sell them somewhere and make money.
Oh man, it's like the ultimate fort.
It was so much fun.
Oh, that's great.
That's awesome.
Cool. Following that question up, what makes South Naknek unique?
I guess that, growing up here, I didn't realize how unique it was. It was, it was just life in general. And it was a lot of fun, but you always had all the resources. You always had fish. You always had a job. You always had things to do, and you had all the game that you wanted in the wintertime or in the fall or whatever. You can go hunting for caribou or moose or whatever. And in the fall time, it was always fun to go duck hunting or geese hunting. So the resources were really, everywhere around us as we grew up. And I guess I didn't realize how special that was. A lot of places don't have the vast resources that nature provides right in our back door.
Yeah. So Carvel, for folks that don't know, how do you get to South Naknek?
Well, it's not connected by a road system, so you fly with the air taxi or your private plane. Back in the day, a lot of people had their own private planes, like the family car almost. And then in the village itself, there was cars and some roads and stuff. And then I think back when the first Honda was produced, the first three-wheeler, it was a Honda 90. Everybody's seen how well they adapted, so everybody started buying those. So that's how you kind of got around. It was pretty neat to do that. And then I remember when the first snow machine showed up, it was an old Polaris, and I thought everybody thought that was pretty cool. It was the first time we ever seen a snow machine. Today's everybody has all those things now.
Right. So how many people live in South Naknek about?
I would say there's probably 50 to 60 people that live here now, but back in the day when I was growing up, there must have been a couple hundred, probably close to 300. But, it varied throughout the years. I remember having our own elementary and high school, and then they also decided that the high school kids needed more exposure to the outside world, I imagine, and they started flying those high school kids across every day. So they would fly across to Naknek and go to high school over there while they maintained an elementary over here. So it was unique in that respect because your school bus was a Cherokee 6. And I remember my class, it was a big class. And when I started going to high school, it was so much fun to go to Naknek and experience more kids, and of course a big gymnasium, and a lot more kids with other things you can go do with, and so that was always unique and fun. And I really loved going to Naknek just to go to a bigger school and also playing the gym, because having a gymnasium is pretty cool. Playing basketball was big. It still is now. And, we used to have to make your own outside court somewhere. You'd put up a basket somewhere and play, off the dirt road or somewhere. And I remember those days growing up. It was a lot of fun.
That's awesome. So it's like a 5-minute flight over the river, or?
Yeah, not even that. Probably it's on the mile. There's only 1 mile, between Naknek and South Naknek, and so it was just to hop right over the river to the other side.
Yeah.
They started flying kids in 1969, I believe. It was the first time that they started flying kids. And when I was flying, there was 36 of us, so there was 3 Cherokee 6 loads of us. 2 planes and 3 trips just to get us all over to go to school and have us start by 9 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
And every day at 3:30, we'd jump on the school bus and go back out the airport, jump on a plane, and fly home.
That's a very unique experience for Alaskans, for sure.
Yeah, and something that even us in Anchorage, we don't even know and have never experienced. So that's cool.
Of course, in the summertime, it was always so busy with the fishing. It still is now. And I guess it was always neat to experience all the influx of the people coming up. And as a kid growing up, you looked for kids on the boats and stuff. So it was very unique. You got to expose to a lot of different people, a lot of different ethnic backgrounds. And the canneries were always full with people working in the cannery or on the boats. And So you were able to go, go do mug up or go to the mess hall, and it was always kind of cool.
Yeah. So tell us about mug up. What does that mean?
Mug up usually means that after the worker starts his day, probably usually 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock, if it was a normal work day, by 10 o'clock you had mug up, so people had a chance to go have a cup of coffee, and that's why they call it mug up. But they also had delicious donuts and all kinds of things that you could have. So then following that, next meal was at noon. It was the lunchtime meal, and then 3 o'clock you had to have another mug up. So it was always cool to have to do those two things during the day, and then you had dinner at 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock for most of the workers, and then 9 o'clock there was another mug up. We'd usually have like sandwiches and that kind of stuff, coffee or cocoa, and so it seems like we were always getting together, and it was always kind of fun just to talk, to see how your day was going and somebody else's day was going. And so it was almost a gathering where you gathered with friends and stuff around the meal. So it was always kind of cool.
Yeah. Well, here at BBNC, we usually try to have a 10 o'clock and 3 o'clock mug up time in the break room.
Yep.
There you go.
Yep.
Yep.
Awesome. So you're currently the Winter Watchman for the cannery. When did you start working in the cannery, and what's your background?
I'm the Winter Watchman here. My brother was before me, and before him, my dad was. So I kind of grew up here in the cannery, and even before my dad, my grandpa Nick was. And so it's kind of a legacy of well over, or at least 100 years or so, staying in our family, working in cannery, and then kind of watching the cannery, making sure everything is good for the winter. That's why they called it a Winter Watchman, so you can watch the place till the cannery workers showed up the next year, in the springtime. And then many times we would just go fishing in the summertime, but lately I haven't been fishing in a number of years now, so I just stay and do managerial stuff at the cannery and stay connected to the seafood industry that way. But yeah, it's been a good life, I guess.
Awesome. So what's your typical day look like working at the cannery?
Well, working at the cannery over here now, a lot of the boats weren't allowed to pull up anymore, so it's mostly set net operations. I was trying to help the set netters on the south side beach as much as possible by making sure that they have a skiff and a truck or a bike or that kind of stuff, and at least they can base their operation. They have their own houses and stuff down the beach, but we provided water, showers and laundry and that kind of facility. And so we're kind of a support facility for set netters. We're definitely not as busy as we used to be. But that's just a change in times, I guess.
So do you live close to the cannery? Do you live on the premises? How does that work, being the Winter Watchman?
I live right here on the premises. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Okay.
I have my own house. It's 60 by 30, and there's 3 stories, so there's plenty enough room for my wife and I.
Oh, lovely. Cool. Well, speaking of fishing, do you have any memorable stories or experiences fishing or hunting?
Well, most of my memorable thing is being able to go out in the tundra with a snow machine or whatever and go caribou hunting. Caribou was big hunting back then, not so much as anymore. You kind of got tier 2 type stuff where you have to get a draw permit. But moose hunting is still good. I don't do it as much as I used to. My nephews are the experts now, so I try to support them when they go out. They usually give me a leg when they're all done. So it's kind of. And then, I do a lot of subsistence fishing still.
Yeah.
It's part of our lifestyle. And being able to go and catch and put up fish, we smoke it or can it or salt it away or find other different ways that we can preserve it so that we can eat it all winter. So,
what are some of the traditional values and practices that you believe are important to preserve? I know you mentioned your nephew, and I know you have some grandkiddos. What's What are some of those values that you've passed down?
Well, just living here, you got to be a good shot, you know, in order to carry. And then, of course, dressing and preserving the food that you get, either fishing, you have smoked fish or frozen fish, or, you know, you try to pass that knowledge along to your kids and grandkids so that it just comes natural. You know, we were taught how to do all that. And then my dad, he was an expert at smoked fish, and he had a nice smokehouse and a bunch of different ways that he could put it kippered or teriyaki or regular smoke. And he had a, you know, like almost like a processing plant within his house downstairs. And along with that, if you went moose or caribou hunting and you wanted to cut up your meat, he had a bandsaw and a vacuum machine where he can vacuum all the product up. And so it's always the best meal of the day when you put it on your plate, because, you know, you prepared it and you took care of it the way you wanted it, or the way you wanted it to serve to your family. Hopefully passing those things along to my kids and grandkids will, you know, they really appreciate coming up here during the summer. They look forward to coming back just to go see grandpa and grandma, as far as being able to put up fish and go hunting or whatever, you know, whatever we have to do. They love doing that kind of stuff. And so it's really, really a valuable life lesson.
Are they going to be coming up this summer?
Oh, yeah. They come up every summer.
Awesome.
So they look forward to that.
That's so special. I spent summers going to Clark's Point, where my mom's from, and like you said, like, I didn't realize how special that was, you know, growing up and having those experiences. But now I look back and, like, hardly anybody's done that, you know. I mean, our people are so lucky to live off the land and have those memories. I'm really thankful for that. So that's awesome. Your grandkids are learning from you.
Yeah.
And my wife, Shirley Zimin, and she loves doing all that stuff and teaching them how to do that, you know, teaching them how to prepare the fish and doing it different ways. And so we do a lot of family preparation as a team. It really passes on a lot of good, valuable information.
That's so cool.
That is. Yeah. Well, speaking of just younger generations, you know, you having grandkids, in what ways do you think the younger generation can reconnect with and preserve Alaska Native and even just in Bristol Bay cultural heritage?
Well, it's really cool to understand where you come from. And both my wife and I love to tell people other stories. And one of the things that happened when this cannery started to become less active, by not allowing the boats come up and just a set net operation, pretty soon, you know, it's not even going to be that. You want to be able to preserve the history. And we were part of a program that turned this cannery itself into a national historical site for the U.S. And so we got documented and listed as a national historical site. And in the process, they had a film crew and some people who came in had ideas. Katie Ringsmith was awesome. It was her idea to put this together. And there was a lot of help from Bob King and then the National Park Service, and then some of the statewide museum people in Juneau were also part of it. But they brought a film crew in, and they interviewed us and talked to a lot of different people about the whole history of, you know, this cannery and how Mugup related to them. So if you Googled cannery caretakers, you would see about a 40-minute video of this area, and it was really insightful. It was more accurate than I've ever seen it described. And so if anybody wanted to go see that, it was sponsored by Bristol Bay Native Corporation and a few other people that signed on to it. But it's it gives you a great historical aspect of what this was like growing up. And this was one of the first canneries in the bay, how this whole fishery just got started and stuff. So really important.
It's a really good film. They did such a good job.
Yeah.
And your daughter Sonia was narrating that film, right?
Yeah, I kind of It was awesome for her to do that.
Yeah.
And she really was professional. I thought she did
She
a
did
bang
so
up
good.
job.
Yeah. And it was good to see her on. We watched that before our interview, just as a refresher, and it was good to see her even on camera.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, it's so cool. Actually, when you're talking about, filming and capturing, your story and your family's story on film, it reminds me of my great grandma. Actually, I don't know who in my family recorded these videos, but they have all these videos of her telling stories from so far back. And it's such a good reminder and, how she even just passed on traditions to my family. And it's really cool. So, I mean, filming those things, capturing photography, recording elders, super important. That's such a good way to preserve history.
For sure.
Well, another thing, as I grew up, I was just a 5 or 6-year-old kid when I first started to learn how to fish down the South Naknek beach. So if I was carrying a red salmon up, it usually came up to my hips. I was so small, and I'd drag those fish up, and then that was the only life I knew as, growing up. It was always fun. It was a family operation. My grandma Mary was instrumental in telling me a lot of stories about that same thing, where, she was almost like a historian herself. And so growing up in that aspect and knowing that there was a lot of rich history here.
Yeah.
In high school, I became a co-editor of a Tuktua magazine, where Bristol Bay in Naknek will produce this yearly annual magazine, and Utuktua was the phrase "I go home," and it translates to the kids wanting to interview elders and all their stories, whatever it may be. And so we documented, and if anybody ever wanted to look at volumes of Utuktua, I think there was like 36 volumes or so. I can't remember how many, but I mean, we really tried to document what the elders knew about life, and so how they pass their traditions on. You can catch a lot of really good stories in there. And what we really wanted to do was document all that. So after growing up listening to my grandma and becoming a Tuktua magazine co-editor and making sure that a lot of this stuff gets written down, and then jumping right into the history aspect of Mugup, where Kitty Ringsworth brought in, was really all encompassing of my life. So I really do love that, being able to tell people what it was like here, and not have to listen to stories that aren't quite true. You always hear somebody else's stories and say, well, yeah, it's not quite like that. This is very accurate. So I really appreciated that aspect of it.
So where can people find those old recordings?
Well, I know the school district had started up that program a few years back under Superintendent Bill Hill, and so there are reissued copies of Tuktua. We kept all the volumes ourselves.
Okay.
And if you go to the South Naknek Library, you can find some. You can find some at the school, I believe. So
awesome.
And a lot of people in the area bought the magazine and supported the program. But it was such a great way of trying to document all of the history of this place. So
that's so cool. I was just talking to a coworker who actually does culture camp. I told her that we were going to interview for the podcast, and she was like, oh, make sure you tell him that, the cannery inspired me to do Mug Up at culture camp. And I don't know if she watched the video or how, just through the grapevine, I'm learning about Mug Up, but they do a Mug Up at culture camp, and they make it a point to include that. So.
Oh, that is so cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Really appreciate everybody jumping on board and helping out. It's just a great idea. It's a feel-good story.
Yeah.
And I'm glad they're keeping it up. One of the worst things I want to see is people not doing it. And so that's why I appreciate people doing it. It's because, once those elders are gone, the stories go with them. And I didn't want to see that. So.
Wow, that's really, really awesome. I'd love to get a copy of those old magazines if we can access them sometime.
Yeah,
Just
well, if you
for-
come to South Naknek, my wife will show you around her museum in the house.
I would love to come. I also remember Sonia telling me about your guys' house and how your wife collects a lot of antiques. And I think we did some photography down there for the annual report a couple years ago, but I myself haven't made it to South Naknek yet. But hopefully one of these days I get to come and see you guys.
Yeah, definitely be entertained by my wife. She's very good at that, and she's a natural genealogist. She knows her family history all the way back to the early 1600s. She's been tracing my family history too, so she's really good at all finding lost relatives and families, and she'll tell you a day's worth of stories.
That's so awesome. I know you guys have also hosted some of the Bristol Bay Native Corporation subsidiary leadership for cultural enrichment programs. So I know they really appreciate everything that you and your family have to share.
Yeah, I liked when the BBNC had some people come through and talk about that a couple of different times here in South Naknek, and it's always good to have that kind of collaboration.
For sure. Cool. Well, do you have any advice for young shareholders and descendants that you'd like to share?
Well, just that listen to your elders and the elders to go ahead and teach the young ones as far as what is going on. And it is such a valuable life lesson that if you listen to your elders and the elders teach their young ones, that we can keep this going. And it's so important for everyone to have that knowledge and background of where we all came from. And so I really do think that that's probably a good life lesson if anybody was listening, that embrace your kids and embrace the young ones, because they are the future.
That's awesome. Do you have any advice for young ones that are growing up in the city, and how do they get connected with their elders?
Well, it's as much as you can read or watch some of these documentations that you see, some of these publications that you see, and try to imagine you and your family and how they had grown up here. Back in the day, it was very hard for a lot of people just to get by. There wasn't a whole lot of jobs and there wasn't a whole lot of money, but you lived off the land, and people survived for many, many years, thousands and thousands of years doing the same thing. And so if you ever get a chance to, come on out and visit people, and sit down, have a cup of coffee with someone, and talk stories.
Great advice. Thank you, Carvel.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I don't think so. All my questions that I had written down, Carvel, you answered all of them.
Well, it's really nice that you called, and I thank you guys for doing what you're doing. Like I said, it's a passion of mine. So, I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. And we really appreciate everything that you've done through your work with the Mug Up exhibit and everything that you do. So thank you again for joining us today.
You bet. I enjoyed it.
Awesome.
All right. Until next time.
We are the legacy of our elders, each of us unique, with gifts to give and histories to make. Our resilience will carry our voices forward. To build the future our elders imagined, we are the next generation of Bristol Bay Native Corporation shareholders, and we share so much more than a corporation.